Hey everyone, we are going to do, or I am going to do, a quick video here on your motives for imperialism notes. So this is the front page of the green packet you got if you were in class on Friday, March 13th. If you were not in class, I have attached it to Google Classroom. You are welcome to print it out if you feel like you have the resources to print. Do not feel like you have to. I'm not making that mandatory or anything like that. Perhaps get a sheet of paper, write down some of the important parts, or just pay really, really good attention to this video. So you can tell right here, this is some fill-in notes, which I'm going to go over first. Then we'll talk about this middle section, the analyzing for the motives of imperialism. Then right here, I'll explain in the video, this would have been a class activity we would have done. If I talk through every single one, this video is going to be really long, and I want to keep your attention. So I'm going to try to keep it as short as I can. So what I will do is I will go through the PowerPoint in the video so that as you practice these pictures, you can pause it, and then I'll give you the answer. So you can look at a picture, practice, and say, what motives do I see in this image? And then I'll give you the answer. I will say that some of them may be a little bit confusing without my explanation. So if you don't like the explanation that I've given on the screen and you want to ask a question, just reach out. Feel free to do that. All right, so let's start the notes. Basically, today we're looking at what factors led to the rise of imperialism. And I should say before I get too far into this, I've also attached on Google Classroom another video that a different teacher has done on the motives of imperialism. It's a shorter video. It kind of just is a quick recap or a quick summary. So if that's something you would want to watch, feel free. He does mention notes in there for his students. Obviously, that's nothing you would actually be doing. You would just be listening to the information. All right, so imperialism is basically a scramble for colonies. We're going to see all of these countries in Europe wanting to get colonies around the world. So this colorful looking puzzle, if you look down here, are all of these countries trying to claim territory around the world. We're also going to look at the motives for imperialism. You know, in this picture you see white Europeans and then natives. And you can obviously see kind of a power difference between the two. And so we're going to look at why were Europeans imperializing, okay? And we'll look at this image as well. All right, so we know that around 1850 in Europe, the Industrial Revolution was at its peak. People were, factory owners were making a ton of money off of these processed goods and these manufactured goods that they were making. And so that's going to be one of the driving forces here. These strong industrialized nations of Europe are going to look to dominate Africa and Asia, who had not industrialized yet. And so these industrialized countries are going to feel like, hey, we're more important, we're better, we're going to come dominate your government and take your resources. So let's look at the reasons why they industrialized. First of all, nationalism. We've talked a little bit about nationalism, the idea that each country just wanted to be really powerful. Having overseas colonies showed that power. It showed that countries were, like, oh, look at me, I'm Europe, or I'm England, I've got, 15 colonies, and I'm better than you. So it turns into a race to see who can get the best and the most colonies through Africa and Asia. And if I'm going too fast, pause it, write the notes, and then come back and listen. Do what works for you here. Second reason, the Industrial Revolution. It's going to lead to a demand for raw materials. Remember, in the Industrial Revolution, countries needed materials to make processed goods, to make factory goods. They also needed a place to sell those goods. So, people in England, let's say they're making some type of good, some type of product, and everybody in England's already bought that product. Now the factories are going to look to sell it to countries in Africa and Asia. And so that's really going to help fuel and propel the Industrial Revolution. The missionary spirit, you're going to see the white European feeling as though they're quote unquote civilized. And catch my tone here. That's obviously not what we believe today. But at the time, Christian white European people felt like, hey, we are way more civilized. We're going to go around the world and help everyone. And if you look at this third point here, white man's burden, they're going to say it's our burden, it's our responsibility to go civilize the world. When in reality, these African and Asian countries were like, hey, we're doing fine without you. Thanks, but no thanks. And so they're going to look at it as kind of their duty to go out and do that. Forms of imperialism, there's 3 different types. Colony, you guys are most familiar with this. It's when a European country took a territory, ruled it directly. So think, for example, if we were in the classroom, I would use East, where our classroom is East 204. I would use that as an example and say, okay, if we're a European country and we go to West 204, and we send, officials to govern the colony and we tell them what to do, we control everything there, they would be our colony. A protectorate is, let me go back, sorry. A protectorate is where we would let the government in West 204, in this case, maybe the government's the teacher, still exist, but we would send advisors to make all the real important decisions, particularly about trade. One of the number one reasons these countries wanted to imperialize had to do with trade. They wanted raw materials and they wanted to sell their manufactured goods and their, products so that they could make money. And then last, sphere of influence. And we're going to see this in the China notes. So we'll come back to this. But this is basically allowing local governments to make all the decisions except for trade. So we wouldn't even send governors to West 204. We would just make sure that they were allowing us to trade with them in a way that we felt was fair, and that would be that. Okay, so what we would do if we were in the classroom is we would stop here and we would actually go over these 5 motives here on your green sheets. So you can see and you can read these for yourself. If you want to draw a symbol for each one, feel free, but obviously we're not doing this activity together, so it's not necessary. Just make sure that you understand them. Economic, that's easy. They wanted to make money. So if they could get raw materials, you see that's bolded here, or if they could get new markets to sell their goods, that was a main motive for imperialism. Religious was to spread Christianity. So for most of these, people draw like a $sign here, a cross here. Ideological was that white man's burden example I gave. The idea that, hey, we're the white Christian people, we're more civilized, and it's our job to come show the rest of the world how to live properly. Political, that's the nationalism idea that each country would have more power and more pride because of, they have a bunch of colonies. And then exploratory was just simply, hey, there's some parts of Africa that no one's ever really explored or no European has really explored. Let's get there. Let's go on an adventure. Let's figure out what's there. Let's go in the name of science. Let's research. Let's find out, what there is to explore. So what we would have done in class is we would have given examples of those. And then you would look at these placards and you can see in your chart it's listed, A, B, C, and then on the back there's more. So for each one, we would say, okay, what do you see here? What motive do you think is what is an example here? And, and then you would put why you chose that. Listen, if you just want to go through each one of these and think to yourself, okay, this one is this motive and that motive, that's fine with me. What I'll do is I'll go through each one in this video, and then I'll show you the answer. So like right now, you would maybe pause, read the answer, and give yourself a chance to read it, and then unpause, and I would go on to placard B. You might pause it right here and say, okay, what am I seeing here? What's happening? Okay, here's the answer. So I'm going to explain this one. I'm going to explain a few, and then I'm just going to flip through them because if I explain each one, this video will be 45 minutes long. And this one, obviously, you see it's a school of some kind. And some of them, you're just not going to know the background, and that's okay. Like, you're guessing. That's fine. If you get some of these wrong, it's okay. Like, it's not, it's just practice, okay? So this is a Sunday school in Angola, and you see that there are white European men up here teaching the native people. And so there's a religious and an ideological motive there. As I go into placard C, there's a lot we don't know about this. What is that flag? Where are they? What are they doing? So you're taking some educated guesses. So go ahead and look at your motives. Think to yourself, pause right now if you need to go through them again. Think, okay, what motives do I see here? Once you feel like you got it, you can unpause, and then I show you it's political. We see that by the flag, and it's exploratory. So I'm going to flip through the rest of these. I'll give you some time to pause and unpause. I recommend do 3 or 4, then flip through and just look at the answers. And just as long as you can say, oh, okay, I see why that's political. I see why that's exploratory. You're in good shape. Okay, so if you want to go ahead and pause this. A lot of people think that this one is ideological, but you don't know for a fact if these people here are slaves or working against their will. But you do know that they're selling ivory, which was a major good. This is a map of Africa. You can imagine that people were exploring it, and it tells you right here, unexplored, unexplored. You got 2 things here, an ad and a excerpt from the White Man's Burden poem I referenced. So you've got ideological and economic. You see some women here talking. We don't know what they're talking about, but it's ideological, teaching those European values, and religious. Take a second and read this. It's a little wordy, but I think you get the gist as you read it. If you want to pause it. And then this one actually has several motives, which is, some of these have multiple motives. This one's political, economic, religious, and ideological. Again, I know I'm going relatively quick, but go ahead and pause as you go. A common mistake on this one is ideological. Again, we don't know for a fact. We don't see any white Europeans. We don't know for a fact if those people are working against their will, but they are selling ground nuts. That's what's in those sacks. And so it's economic. This one's another one. There's a lot going on here. But this is Saigon in Vietnam, and it's political. You see the military and flags to try to get political control. This is an advertisement for tea being sold from the British to the Indian people. And so it's economic and political, trying to gain prestige through trade. This is a man standing on top of all of Africa. This is a relatively famous picture called the Rhodes Colossus. And you see political and exploratory. This Cecil Rhodes here was a British man who wanted to control all of Africa for the prestige of Britain. This is an epitaph or a saying on a tombstone, which was David Livingstone, who was an explorer in Africa. So you can read that, and it's religious and exploratory. And then lastly, we don't know where these ships are going or what they are doing, but if we click on this, we know they're the Suez Canal in Egypt, and economic and political. The last thing that we would have done is we would have looked at that poem there on the bottom of the page, the White Man's Burden poem. Go and take a look at that, work with it for a few minutes, basically looking at, it was what the Europeans felt at the time. It's a racist tone that they were better. And there's obviously not the perspective of the actual natives. Once in a while, I have students respond to the White Man's Burden with a poem called The Native Man's Problem. And basically it's the native person saying back to the white European man, like, listen, we don't want you here. Take a hike. We're good. We don't need you. So that's kind of the 2 opposing sides here. Europeans want colonies. They want control. They want trade. They want to sell their manufactured goods. They want to civilize the rest of the world. And we're going to see resistance. We're going to see the natives say to the Europeans, like, no, we're good. Thanks, but no thanks. Okay, I'm done with the video. If you have questions, please ask. Like I said, I added that additional YouTube video. If you want to go through that, it's only like 4 minutes, gives you the gist of the motives once more, and then you should be set. As always, reach out with questions. Let me know what I can help with. And I will talk to you when we do the India notes.